Olivia Morgan stared at the divorce papers on her attorney's mahogany desk, her wedding ring creating a hollow sound as she set it down beside them. At 32, ending a 12-year marriage wasn't how she'd imagined her life unfolding. "Are you certain about this, Mrs. Harrison?" Her attorney, Rebecca Fleming, asked gently. "It's Ms. Morgan now," Olivia corrected, tucking a strand of chestnut hair behind her ear. "And yes, I'm sure." 6 years ago, Olivia wouldn't have believed this ending possible. She and James had been inseparable since high school. The quiet, artistic girl and the ambitious boy with dreams bigger than their small town. They'd married at 20, supporting each other through college and the lean years that followed. "He's building something for us," she used to tell her worried friends. When James worked 16-hour days launching his tech startup, she'd believed it then. Painting in their tiny apartment while waiting for him to come home. When success came, it arrived like a tidal wave. Harrison Technologies revolutionized healthcare software, and suddenly their life transformed. The tiny apartment became a penthouse. Date nights at the local diner became business dinners with investors. Weekends exploring art galleries became international business trips James took alone. "I thought we'd grow together," Olivia whispered to her empty studio one night, surrounded by half-finished canvases. Instead, they grew parallel, then apart. She remembered the exact moment she realized their marriage was failing. Their 10th anniversary, James had forgotten entirely. When he finally returned home at midnight, his apology came with a diamond bracelet, but without the one thing she truly wanted, his presence. "We need to talk about us," she'd said that night. James had sighed, loosening his tie. "Wouldn't it wait until next week?" "The Singapore merger. It's always next week," Olivia interrupted. "There's always a merger or a meeting or a crisis. I've become an afterthought in your life, James." "That's not fair," he'd protested. "Everything I do is for our future." "What future?" she'd asked, tears streaming down her face. "We don't even have a present." The arguments that followed over months became a familiar dance. James promised to change. Olivia tried to understand. But promises faded. Beneath urgent emails and midnight conference calls, the final breaking point came when she discovered he'd purchased a lake house, their dream. Home they'd planned together for years and turned it into a corporate retreat. Sent her without consulting her. "I thought you'd be pleased," he'd said, genuinely confused by her tears. 2 days later, Olivia packed her bags and moved into a downtown apartment. 6 months of separation counseling followed, but James attended only half the sessions. Always distracted, always checking his phone. Now, watching Rebecca collect the signed papers, Olivia felt hollow rather than liberated. "He didn't even fight for us," she murmured. Rebecca squeezed her hand. "Sometimes people don't realize what they have until it's gone." Outside, autumn leaves swirled around Olivia's feet as she walked away from her old life. Wondering if James would even notice when the papers reached his desk. 6 months after signing the divorce papers, Olivia adjusted her emerald cocktail. Dressed in the mirror of the Westbrook Hotel's elegant bathroom. The annual Children's Hospital Charity Gala wasn't her usual scene. But as the newly appointed art director for the Healing Arts Foundation, her attendance was required. "You look stunning," said her colleague Natalie, applying a final touch. Of lipstick beside her, Olivia smiled weakly. "Thanks. I'm just nervous about the networking part." What she didn't mention was the real source of her anxiety. The gala's primary sponsor, Harrison Technologies. She'd checked the guest list 3 times, confirming James would be in Tokyo this week. His coup would represent the company instead. Returning to the ballroom, Olivia circulated professionally, discussing the foundation's art therapy programs with potential donors. The evening progressed smoothly until the MC tapped the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have a surprise guest this evening. Please welcome our most generous benefactor, Mr. James Harrison." Olivia froze mid-conversation, her champagne flute nearly slipping from her fingers. There he was, striding confidently toward the podium, her almost ex-husband, devastatingly handsome in a tailored tuxedo. His speech was brief and charming, focusing on the hospital's innovative pediatric programs. Then his gaze swept the room and locked with hers. His composed expression faltered for just a moment before he recovered. Finishing his remarks, for the next hour, Olivia maneuvered through the crowd, strategically avoiding James while feeling his eyes tracking her movements. She was discussing a potential donation with an elderly philanthropist when a hand touched her elbow. Olivia. The familiar voice sent electricity through her veins. She turned, meeting the hazel eyes that had once been her entire world. "James, I thought you were in Tokyo." I rescheduled. He looked different, somehow thinner, with subtle shadows beneath his eyes. "You look beautiful. Thank you." Awkwardness stretched between them. "Congratulations on the European expansion. I read about it. You're still following company news?" "It's force of habit," she admitted. Before James could respond, the lights flickered, then plunged the ballroom into darkness. Gasps and nervous laughter filled the room as the hotel staff announced a temporary power outage. In the darkness, Olivia felt James's hand find hers. "Come with me," he whispered. "Please." Against her better judgment, she followed him through the darkness, his hand warm and familiar around hers. They stepped onto a deserted terrace, the city lights providing a soft glow. "I've missed you," James said quietly, his voice rough with emotion. "Every day." "James, don't I know I have no right to say this," he interrupted. "But seeing you tonight, I realized I never actually told you how much I love you." Before she could process his words, James stepped forward, cupping her face gently in his hands. Their lips met in a kiss that felt like coming home, tender, passionate, and filled with years of memories when they parted. Breathless, the lights inside flickered back on, illuminating the tears on Olivia's cheeks. "Why now?" she whispered. "After all this time?" "Because losing you was the wake-up call I needed. The divorce papers are still on my desk, unsigned." Olivia stepped back, emotions warring within her. "A kiss doesn't fix what broke us, James." "I know," he said, "but it might be a place to start." 3 weeks after the gala, Olivia sat across from James at a quiet corner table in Bellini's, the Italian restaurant where they'd celebrated their first anniversary. The familiar scent of garlic and basil hung in the air, but the easy comfort they once shared remained elusive. "How's the foundation?" James asked, breaking an awkward silence. "Growing. We just received a grant for our veterans program." Olivia twirled pasta around her fork. "And Harrison Technologies. I assume you're still working 80-hour weeks?" James set down his wine glass. "Actually, no. I've scaled back considerably. Promoted Ethan to co-CEO."
Aye.
Surprise flickered across Olivia's face. "Really? Last time we discussed that, you said no one could handle the responsibility but you." "I've realized some things are more important than maintaining complete control," he replied, his eyes never leaving hers. Their tentative reconnection over recent weeks had been fraught with uncertainty. Coffee meetings that turned into dinner, cautious conversations that skirted the deeper issues. The kiss at the gala lingered between them, unmentioned yet impossible to forget. "Why did you really invite me here tonight, James?" Olivia finally asked. He reached across the table, his fingers stopping just short of hers. "Because I want to understand where we went wrong." "Really understand? Not just apologize and move on." "We've had this conversation before," she reminded him. "During separation counseling?" "No," James shook his head. "I talked at you during those sessions, defending myself instead of listening. I'm asking you to tell me now, and I promise to just listen." Olivia studied him, searching for the impatience that usually characterized these discussions. Finding none, she took a deep breath. "You stopped seeing me?" she began quietly. "Somewhere between our 5th anniversary and your second round of venture capital. I became part of the background of your life, like the paintings on our walls that you walk past without noticing." James flinched, but remained silent as promised. It wasn't about the late nights or the travel. It was that when you were physically present, you were mentally elsewhere. Every conversation became transactional scheduling, coordinating, planning. The intimacy vanished. Her voice cracked slightly. "Do you know we went an entire month without touching each other? Not even holding hands?" Pain shadowed his features as he nodded. "The worst part," she continued, "was watching you pour passion and attention into your company while our marriage withered. You remembered your CFO's birthday, but forgot our anniversary." You could quote your quarterly projections, but couldn't tell me what art project I was working on. I thought providing for us was enough, James said softly. That's just it. There was no us anymore. Just you building an empire and me orbiting around it. Olivia blinked back tears. I didn't leave because I stopped loving you, James. Left because I couldn't bear loving someone who didn't see me anymore? The waiter approached, offering dessert menus, but James waved him away. I need time, she said as they reached her car. James nodded, respecting her boundary. I've got nothing but time for you now, Olivia. I just hope it's not too late. Rain pattered against the windows of Olivia's art studio as she added final touches to her newest painting and abstract piece, capturing the turbulent emotions of the past month. Since their dinner at Bellini's, James had been consistently present in ways she'd forgotten were possible. Wednesday evening art gallery visits, Sunday brunches followed by walks through the botanical gardens, phone calls that weren't interrupted by business emergencies. Small moments that gradually rebuilt what years of neglect had destroyed. The buzzer rang, announcing James's arrival. They had plans to attend a jazz concert, something they'd enjoyed early in their relationship before business dinners replaced date nights. The studio looks different, James observed, after greeting her with a careful kiss on the cheek. He studied the canvases lining the walls. Pausing at a particular piece of portrait of him she'd painted years ago, his eyes focused on something distant. You kept this, Olivia nodded. It reminds me of what I don't want to go back to. James winced but didn't defend himself. Growth, Olivia had noticed, manifested in his new ability to sit with uncomfortable truths. I have something to show you before we leave, he said, guiding her to the small seating area. From his briefcase, he withdrew a thick document bearing the Harrison Technologies logo. What's this? She asked, taking the folder. The final paperwork transferring 50% of Harrison Technologies to the Harrison Foundation. The board approved it yesterday. His voice was calm, but his fingers tapped nervously against his knee. The foundation will focus on expanding art therapy programs in children's hospitals nationwide. I'd like you to consider being its director. Olivia stared at him, stunned. You're giving away half your company? I'm redirecting it, he corrected, building something meaningful beyond profit margins. Something that honors what matters to both of us. Before she could respond, James's phone rang, the special tone reserved for executive emergencies. Olivia's heart sank with familiar disappointment as he checked the screen. It's Thomas, he said, naming his CFO. The Singapore merger must be go. Ahead, she interrupted, the old script playing out exactly as she'd feared. Take the call. To her surprise, James declined the call and turned off his phone entirely. Whatever it is can wait. But the merger is important, he finished. But not as important as this moment with you. Simple act, choosing her over work for perhaps the first time, brought tears to Olivia's eyes. Why now, James? What changed? He took her hands, his expression serious. The day those divorce papers arrived, I sat alone in our empty house and finally faced what I'd lost. Not just you, but myself. I became someone I never wanted to be, a man who sacrificed love for achievement. The rain intensified outside, creating a cocoon of intimacy in the small studio. I'm afraid, Olivia admitted, voicing her deepest fear, afraid that when things get challenging again, when the next big deal comes along, you'll become invisible again, James finished. I understand that fear. I haven't earned your trust back yet. I'm afraid I haven't fully processed my anger, she continued. Sometimes I look at you and still feel the hurt of all those years. James nodded. We don't have to rush this. Whatever pace you need. His words were interrupted by his second phone beginning to ring. His personal line that only a handful of people had access to. You should check, Olivia said. It might be important, James answered, his expression shifting from annoyance to concern. After a brief conversation, he looked at Olivia with apology in his eyes. Thomas was trying to reach me because my mother's been taken to the hospital. Possible heart attack. Olivia immediately grabbed her keys. I'll drive you. They sat together in the hospital waiting room, the jazz concert forgotten. When the doctor finally emerged with news of Eleanor Harrison's stable condition, James broke down in relief, Olivia's arms providing comfort. Thank you for being here, he whispered against her hair. Where else would I be? Realizing the truth in her own words. Despite everything, when it truly mattered, they still instinctively turned toward each other. Autumn leaves crunched beneath Olivia's boots as she made her way along the familiar path to Crystal Lake. 1 year had passed since the charity gala that had reconnected her with James. 6 months since she'd moved back into their home, not the penthouse, but a new place they'd chosen together. Their journey back to each other hadn't been without challenges. Old habits occasionally resurfaced. Arguments still happened, but they now possessed tools they'd lacked before: patience, communication, and the wisdom that came from nearly losing everything. The Harrison Foundation had flourished under Olivia's direction, bringing art therapy programs to children's hospitals across the country. James had found unexpected fulfillment in his reduced role at Harrison Technologies. Discovering that success measured in human impact brought greater satisfaction than market domination. As she rounded the final bend in the path, Olivia stopped short. There on the small wooden dock extending into the lake stood James, surrounded by dozens of lanterns glowing softly in the dusk. Behind him floated paper boats carrying candles and installation reminiscent of her first major art exhibition. "What is all this?" she asked, approaching slowly. James took her hands, his expression a mixture of nervousness and certainty. "Do you remember our first apartment? That tiny place with the leaky faucet and the window that wouldn't close properly?" Olivia smiled. "Of course, we could barely afford ramen noodles. We were sitting on that lumpy futon when you told me your dream of creating art that healed people." His voice grew soft with memory. "I promised you then that someday we'd build that dream together. I remember," she whispered. "I got distracted by building an empire instead," James continued. "But standing here now, watching you bring art and healing to children who desperately need both, I realize you never lost sight of what truly matters." From his pocket, he withdrew not a ring box as she expected, but a small, worn notebook. Olivia recognized it immediately, the journal where they'd written their hopes and plans during those early years. "I found this when we were moving," he explained, opening to a page marked with a faded ribbon. "On our wedding night, we each wrote a promise to each other. Mine says, 'I promise to build a life where Olivia's dreams have as much room to grow as my own.'" Tears filled Olivia's eyes. As James continued, "I broke that promise once. I'm asking for the chance to honor it for the rest of our lives." He knelt on the dock, removing a simple gold band from the journal's pages. "This isn't a new ring with new promises. With our original vows, the ones I should have kept the first time." Olivia's hands trembled as James held the ring between them. "Olivia Morgan Harrison, will you marry me again? Not with grand gestures or extravagant promises, but with the quiet commitment to grow together, even when it's difficult. Especially when it's difficult." In that moment, Olivia saw clearly the journey they had traveled from the young couple. With nothing but dreams, through the painful years of disconnect, to this second chance built on deeper understanding. "Yes," she whispered, allowing him to slip the familiar gold band onto her finger. "But this time, we do it differently."
Yes.
Twilight settled over Crystal Lake. They sat together on the dock, legs dangling over the water, speaking softly of their reimagined future. Not a fairy tale ending, but something more valuable. A love tempered by hardship and renewed by choice. "Do you remember what you said that night at the gala?" Olivia asked, leaning against his shoulder. "About the kiss being a place to start?"
James
Nodded, threading his fingers through hers. "Well, I think I finally understand what you meant," she continued. "It wasn't just about passion rekindled. It was about remembering who we were beneath all the hurt, finding that core of love that never actually disappeared." As darkness fell completely, they lit the final lantern together, releasing it onto the lake to join the others, a constellation of light reflecting their past, present and future, intertwined as one continuous journey. "2 second chances," James whispered against her lips. Olivia replied, closing the distance between them, with a kiss that carried all the wisdom of their winding path back to each other.